We've got Carleen Matthews on the podcast. Carleen is a multiple-time CrossFit Games athlete. She also owns an affiliate called CrossFit St. Helens, which is pretty impressive because the demands of owning and operating a CrossFit affiliate are not necessarily conducive to training at a high level, right? It's pretty difficult to coach all day, respond to emails, all that kind of stuff, and also just smash yourself with training and handle the volume that's required to actually compete at the CrossFit Games level these days. So very impressive that Carleen is able to pull that off. One thing that I think is really interesting about her story is just watching her climb on the leaderboard over the years. She started out qualifying for regionals, finished, modest finishes, and then year after year just kept climbing and climbing and climbing. She won her regional a few times and has been to the games for 3 years. She had to pull out this most recent year due to an injury. And something else I think is pretty fascinating about her story has to do with her battles with addiction and eating disorder in her past. And, it's kind of one of those almost cliche stories of overcoming obstacles and all that, but there's all kinds of mindset pieces related to that. Like, how do you actually process these feelings and impulses and all that sort of stuff that's not necessarily helpful for what you're trying to accomplish? So we get into that. We also talk about her work with the recovering population at her affiliate. So some pretty interesting stuff here, not just from her story, but also her mindset and how she approaches all of these different challenges in ways I think are pretty helpful for anyone who likes to, push themselves hard and doesn't always want to listen to the nagging, unhelpful little monkey mind sort of telling us to do stuff that isn't really what we want to do. How was coaching today?
It was good. It's easy.
Yeah.
It was easy today. I programmed a main site WOD with the 400 meter run, 50 air squats. So it's like, I don't really have to do much.
Was that 4 rounds or whatever?
Yeah.
I think that was literally the first CrossFit workout I ever did.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's pretty funny.
It's a good starter for sure.
I mean, it's probably too many squats, especially since I didn't know how to squat. But yeah, I had played soccer growing up, and I had a bunch of knee problems and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, all right, I need to do something a little bit different. And I had heard of CrossFit, and I just went to the site randomly one day and was like, all right, I guess I'll just do this. And it was that. And
that's cool.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of brutal.
Yep.
All right, this is Todd Neef, and I'm here on Skype with Carleen Matthews for her first Skype call ever, which is very exciting. She's a podcast veteran, but has somehow never made the transition over to Skype. So this is a very exciting day for Skype users across the land. Microsoft stock is soaring, and Wall Street is going crazy over this new development. So this is pretty exciting. But Carleen is a multiple-time CrossFit Games athlete with a pretty intense backstory as well. And I got connected to Carleen through Jason Phillips, who is your nutrition coach. And we were just talking about podcasts and guests and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, listen, you need to get Carleen on the show because she has a lot to say and a lot to talk about. And I said, this sounds like a really good idea. So Carleen, thank you for taking the time to,
absolutely
learn how to use Skype and all that kind of good stuff. So let's do this. Just to start with, brief background on you, so people kind of know what's going on. I've done some research on you, kind of looked up your previous placings in the CrossFit Games, all that kind of stuff. And actually, you know what? I was at the games this year, and you were in the affiliate owners group at one point.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know this or not, but people were like, "Wait, is that Carleen Matthews?" And I'm like, yeah, it looks exactly like Carleen Matthews, and she's wearing a jacket that says Matthews on it. I think pretty sure. And they're like, oh yeah, cool. But why don't you give us the quick rundown of your history? Like, what have you done competition wise? You own an affiliate, just 30-second background for the people.
Oh gosh, 30 seconds. I played college sports and sports growing up. And so the transition to CrossFit was kind of just, it was the next best thing, right? So got into CrossFit, went to regionals a couple years, decided that I wanted to go to the games. And so I worked my ass off to get to that level, 3 times games athlete, 7 times regional athlete, CrossFit St. Helens affiliate owner. We also run a recovery program out of CrossFit St. Helens. So there's been a lot of, I don't want to say hype, but we're trying to get out, to the world that what we're doing here at CrossFit St. Helens with people in recovery and CrossFit, and trying to, branch out to get more people involved in doing the same type of thing.
Sure. And by recovery, you don't mean compression boots and ice baths.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not CrossFit mobility recovery, I guess. We're talking recovery from drugs and alcohol. So anyone that has 48 hours clean and sober from drugs and alcohol can come and participate in free CrossFit.
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll probably dig into that a little bit more as we get going.
Absolutely.
I want to definitely hear more about that. So, in your kind of a forced elevator pitch on, hey, listen, I did some CrossFit. I was pretty good at it, all that kind of stuff. I want to dig in more, because I think that something that I find really interesting is, sort of looking at your history of placings in the open, at regionals, at the games, is just the steady improvement that you've made over time, right? That everyone knows that the sport gets deeper and deeper every single year. More people come into the sport. People get better at training for it. They have a better understanding of what they should and shouldn't be doing. More people are using steroids and getting caught for it. Like every year, like people are just getting a lot better. But it seems like you've consistently outpaced the field in terms of your improvement. What has that felt like for you? I mean, you like you said, you started off doing CrossFit, not really knowing what's going on. How have you approached that process of saying, okay, how do I get better, and how do I make sure I'm improving fast enough to stay at the top of the sport?
I mean, I don't necessarily like know how I continue to stay at the top of the sport. I kind of just, do what I've been doing. And it's one of those things that with CrossFit, I think just like experience develops you as an athlete. So you see some people that come into CrossFit and, their first year they pop up and they're big. But that's a very rare. You're going to see more veteran athletes, more experience. And with that, I even see it in my gym members. It's like, people are like, but so-and-so, can do this, this, and this. And like, yeah, but they've been here for 5 years. They put in 5 years of work. And like, that's why they're getting better. That's why they're continuing to progress. And so it was probably my third year of CrossFit that I realized at regionals that I was making that progression, that I had went from 18th place at regionals to a 9th place to a 4th place. And I was like, man, if I continue this trend, like I'm going to be on the podium next year. Like this is where I'm going to be at. And at that
time, 4th place was one spot out of qualifying for the games, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So just that very uncomfortable, like, oh, I did a good job, but like not quite enough.
Yep. And it was like points too. It was like 1 or 2 points. So I knew that, with that, I was going to see, if I continued to progress the way I was progressing, that I was going to see improvement. And I did the same thing at the games, which is really cool to look back on also, is that my first year I was 36th, my second year I was 24th. Obviously my third year I had to pull out, but we were looking for that to be, last year to be a big year and to see improvement. And I keep telling, my coach and I keep talking that if I can continue to see improvement, I can't stop, so once I stop seeing improvement, then I can, take a look at, how much longer I want to, continue to do the sport as a professional sport, or how much longer I want to compete, basically. But until I stop improving, like I can't, the sky is the limit, so I don't want to tie up my shoes yet.
Yeah, sure. So something I think is interesting that is not necessarily the way that everyone will react to, finishing 4th at regionals, like one spot out of going to the games, right? That for some people that would be, like a soul-crushing defeat. But for you, it seemed to be somewhat inspirational, right? Obviously it was an improvement over the previous year, but what was your thought process after that happened? Are you thinking, okay, cool, like I hit a tipping point and I suddenly realized that I'm better than I think I am? Or are you thinking, oh, if I just tweak a few things, I can, potentially be on the podium next year? What are your actual thoughts surrounding that?
So that was the first year after, I had lost my dad, and so when I didn't make it to the games that year, it was like just more of like that, like, okay, I was so close, and like, and this is what I'm going to do, because I don't know, I've told the story a couple of times, but it was the last thing I had told my dad that I would do, is that I was going to make it to the games. And so it just kind of rolled over for me. Like it wasn't really an option to give up. It just kind of put more of a fire under me. And it did make me realize that I could be there, and that I deserved to be there. It made me work even harder and want it that much more, being that close.
Yeah, sure. Because I've seen that go both ways for athletes, where I've coached athletes who have finished, one or two spots out of qualifying for regionals in the open a few times. And sometimes you see that, they're just done after that. They're like, okay, well, I did everything I thought I could, and I still came up short. And like, why me? If I had done this, then I would have gotten these points. And I know this person cheated on their scores, so they got to go instead of me. And like, this is terrible, right? And I think that, everyone is going to have that reaction a little bit. And I've seen other people have the exact opposite reaction, where it's like, okay, I'm so close. I know there's more that I can give. Like next year, I'm going to be there. Right. And I don't necessarily know what makes people have those alternative reactions. But for you, is that something you've always sort of had? Like, okay, like I'm going to take this and I'm going to run with it? Or is it something that you've learned over time?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that being an athlete, I've learned to, work through adversity. I think that for me, working through adversity is going to be a lifelong process. I don't think that I've mastered it yet. I think that there's times when like I can get down and, have that mentality. But, I've always had the mentality of that I was going to have to work for everything I've gotten. So things were never really like given to me. And I think that when I, did like start to see that progression of like hard work paying off, that it just fueled my fire even more. As opposed to, like, I've never been somebody to just give up on anything. And so for me, especially like the fact that I had that goal and that, like promise to my dad was the real like driving force for me that year. Like that year, that was what it was all about. It was all like that every day came back down to like, this is what you told your dad. Like this was the promise that you made. And this was the commitment that you made to him and yourself. Like it wasn't necessarily a commitment that I had made to him, but it was also something I made that commitment to him because I had made it to myself. Like, if that makes sense. Like I had told him that I would do that because he knew that I wanted it that bad. And that it was something that I was striving for. And so it was, for me, it was like proving that like I can do what I what I set my mind to. And, so, I mean, it was external, but it was also internal.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Cause I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, I told my dad I was going to do this, but then it's not like you're thinking, oh, well, if I told my dad I'm going to do this and then I don't do it, then I've let my dad down. I mean, is it negative like that for you? Are you using it as a negative or a positive to motivate yourself?
I mean, I don't really know. I know that as I processed it more, like once I met my goal, so once I got to the games, I processed it more and realized that, deep down, there was a lot of, I had it set in my head that if I did this, if I made it to the games, I would get my dad back. And obviously that didn't happen. And so once I did make it to the games, it was like, oh, okay, what now? Like, well, so it wasn't like, I didn't feel like I was going to let him down, because I knew deep down that I never would, but there was like some weird, like external like motivation around that, of like, if I do this, then I will make him happy and I'll get my dad back. And I knew that wasn't the reality, but it was weird. It was like that was the motivation. And so after that year, I had to really reevaluate motivation and my why, and my drive. What was my drive to go to the games? Why did I really want to go to the games in the first place?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you achieve this goal, which is so difficult to even get to, and maybe have some sort of assumption that it's going to, fill a piece for you, right? Like,
yeah, it was like, it was going to fill this void that I had, and it didn't.
Yeah, sure. And then when that happens, I mean, you sort of mentioned it, but you said you had to reevaluate your motivation and think about internal versus external rewards and that kind of thing. I mean, what does that process look like? Because you see it with almost anything that people strive for, right? Whether it's social status or money or placing in a competition or Instagram followers, it's like, when I have this, then I will be X. And then you get there and you're just still the same person.
Yeah. I think that's really true. Like, I've had to reevaluate, like the motivation of, like, exactly what you're saying is that if I get, and when I get on the podium and make it to the CrossFit Games, that doesn't necessarily it doesn't mean I'm going to be happy. It's the same thing as like when people look at the scale, like if I see this number on the scale, I'm in turn going to be happy. Well, no, you're always going to want more. And so I've had to change my mindset around the outcome and I'm not necessarily striving as much for the big finish line, but more changing my, outlook, and my success is based more on the journey, so that that every single day becomes the thing that makes me happy. And the thing that keeps me going, as opposed to, and if I continue to focus on the journey and the process, and be grateful for what I have, and give back and stuff like that, and work as hard as I can every single day, things will fall into place and it'll end up being what I ultimately wanted. But that doesn't make me successful or not, or making it to the CrossFit Games is not going to instantly make me a happy person. It's the days leading up to it that is what makes me successful, and the things I go through and get through that are more keys to my success.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you said some stuff in there about focusing on the journey, which I think is super profound. But I think something else that we see a lot is, people are on Instagram and they're like going to post a quote that's like, okay, focus on the journey, and have some stones in a path or something in the background. And you're like, oh, very inspiring. And then they go in the gym and they miss a lift and they throw their belt against the wall and kick the plates, and then, they start talking shit about the person across the gym who they don't like. And then they're scrolling through Instagram between their sets, feeling like shit about themselves because they're not lifting as much. And then the next day they're like, cool. And they post another inspirational quote about, the process. And it's like, you're just not actually doing any of this. You're just talking about it. So what for you, does it look like to actually implement that process focus, right? And what changes have you made to actually feel different on a daily basis?
I think that, well, first of all, I think that the bad days are a part of the process. So whereas I may, start my day off with super inspiring quote, or, I don't know, I may have every intention to have an amazing day in the morning, and it just might not be there. And I may have a bad day in the gym, and that's okay. It doesn't feel okay at the moment, but the reality of it is that that is a part of my process. And in order for me to have good days and to make my other days feel better, I have to have the low days. So I mean, I do think that is part of the process. But I also, have been trying to, I've been, especially this now new year, my goal is to journal every day. So it allows me to see progress. It allows me to reflect back on good days. It allows me to remember my process, remember my journey, instead of just like, oh, every day this week has been horrible. Well, not every day this week has been horrible. Like if I journal things, I'm able to see, like one good thing that happened 2 days ago. Or, you see a lot of times people are saying, oh, I had a client actually say, I had a great week. I had 4 PRs, but I'm just in a lull right now. Well, you had 4 PRs last week. Did you forget about that? Like, that's something to celebrate for the next month, right? So I think that for me, it's important to like remember the good days. And so I actually got it for Christmas. It's a journal, but it's my favorite moment of the day journal.
Ooh.
So I'm able to literally, if it's one word, it might be one word that I write in the journal, but my goal is to put pen to paper every single day. And, so that I can remember like my favorite part of the day. So I have a positive for every single day.
Is this something you're doing in the morning? Is this like, okay, the morning I'm reflecting on the previous day and like, here's the thing that I'm appreciative of or grateful for? Is that the process?
So I've made it. I'm a firm believer in like, it's hard to create new habits. And for me, I don't want to set myself up to make this like really hard thing, or not necessarily hard thing, but like make something that is not going to be doable for myself. And so when I set this goal, it was morning, at night, whenever I can get it in, right? So I don't want to, oh shoot, I forgot to do it this morning. Great, that's one day down, you know what I mean? Like, so I didn't put requirements on it for myself. So if I get it done in the morning, like this morning I did yesterday's, but I've already written one for today, right? So it can be in the morning to reflect on the previous day, or it might be, like at night to reflect on that day. Just whenever I can get it in, it's important for me to just have something for every day.
Sure. So you essentially set the barrier to entry super low, just so you can be consistent with the process of doing that.
Yeah, I just want to create that habit, and I don't want it to be something that I know I'm not going to do, or something that I know I'm only going to, I'm going to have to work really, really, really hard at this. So I'm probably only going to do it for like a week. Like that's not worth it for me.
Yeah, it's like someone starting a new diet. They're like, okay, I listened to 15
Yeah.
podcasts and I'm going to do a ketogenic intermittent fasting diet, and I'm going to track my macros, and I'm going to time my meals like this, and I'm going to, and you're like, no, you're not. Like,
Yep.
you've never done any of this. What are you talking about? You're not going to do any of that.
Right.
Calm down.
Choose one thing and make it super small and be successful. And then once you create that habit, choose another thing, make it super small. Do another thing, create that habit.
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned on another interview that you've been getting some coaching surrounding, I guess, like competitive mindset and things like that. Is this journaling process from that coaching, or is this something you sort of developed on your own?
This was something that I decided to do on my own, but it kind of started with that. I learned that the last podcast I did with Breaking Muscle, I learned that I process things really well when I speak out loud. And so this was kind of a alternative for me to continue to process things with just writing it down. Like I'll write things down and like journal on my phone. Like if I'm just like doing like a recovery ride, like bike ride, on the assault bike or the C2, I'll just sit there and just kind of like start typing on my phone. But this was a way for me to kind of like create a new habit and make sure that, things got like processed.
Sure. And with, I guess with that process, do you share these journals with anyone, or is that just for you internally just to kind of work through things?
I haven't shared it with anyone like specifically. I was sharing with the guy I was working with for kind of like mental training. I was sharing some of my stuff with him, but right now, like my journaling that I'm doing, I'm not sharing with anyone.
Have you considered sort of updating that stuff and making it public on like a blog or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem, or I'm not opposed to doing that. What I love about it is that I'm going to have, like ideally I'll have 365 days of basically like gratitude, and it would be cool at the end of the year to like type them out and kind of maybe like, I don't know. It'll basically be a book full of, gratitude, and I don't know, it'd be cool.
Yeah, because it's probably a separate thing where you don't want to have the filter of being like, oh, I'm going to post this, so I have to make sure it's good, right? That would probably disrupt the habit of actually doing the journaling. But I do think that there would probably be tons of people who would be very stoked to sort of see that like internal thought process and what that dialogue actually looks like with yourself, essentially. Yeah,
I do love that idea, like to eventually do that.
Yeah. So you mentioned this mindset coaching, which is interesting to me because I think that, being mentally tough and mindset coaching is sort of like a buzzword within the functional fitness community. And I see it just dramatically misapplied all the time. That it ends up being sort of like I was making fun of a bit earlier, just a lot of like fluffy inspirational quotes, which like, yeah, maybe that's cool, but like you're not actually applying anything. And then the other thing that I see from a lot of people is just being super hard on themselves. They're like, yeah, I'm mentally tough, which means I'm a fucking psycho and I just beat myself up all day and just try to push myself relentlessly no matter what's going on in my life. Which isn't necessarily helpful. So what for you did you learn from this like mental toughness coaching, so to speak, that's been applicable for, I guess, just your training and your mindset overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was at a place where I was that person. I was like, yeah, I've worked on my mental game. And then when I sat back and looked at it, it was like, but what did you really do? Like, exactly, what what did you do to work on your mental game? Did you just feel more confident this year? Well, yeah, like that was it. And so at that point, I realized that I really needed to reach out and actually get, some tools for my toolbox. So that's what it looks like for me. It looks like developing tools to help me get through adversity, to help me to be confident when I'm not feeling confident, and to learn what my confidence boosters are, learn what my triggers are for low confidence, learn how to create a mindset for success, learn how to, how do I get myself in the zone when I need to compete? How do I get myself to focus on the task at hand? How do I, how am I able to clear my mind and just move? A lot of trial and error, a lot of trying things, being like, yeah, this doesn't really work for me, but maybe at some point I might use it. Things like meditation, trying to incorporate visualization, get better at visualization, and, just little tools that I can keep in my toolbox and pull them out when I need them.
Sure. So one thing that I thought was interesting that is you discussing how you get in the zone to compete, right? And I think we see all kinds of different tactics for that. You see some people who, are jumping around, headbutting the wall and taking smelling salts and getting all jacked up. You see other people who are sort of trying to calm themselves down and focus, and they're closing their eyes and doing breathing motions and all that kind of stuff. What for you is that process to get in the zone?
I think it depends. And I think that's kind of what's cool about developing all these different tools for me is that it depends on what kind of focus I need to be in. Like when I'm looking at the open, the focus that I need to have is one of that I need to be in the zone. I need to black myself out, like not think about anything and just move. If I need to snatch, 1 rep max snatch, I have to have 100% confidence. I have to be completely focused on, my movement techniques. And then I have to be in that, like for me, I have to get like psyched up and amped up. But, so it kind of just depends on what I'm about to do. It's different for like different workouts, and, different situations. So it's kind of like hard to say, does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. The different, especially in a sport like CrossFit, it's not just like, okay, every time you're doing a max deadlift. So it's like, like scream and shout and start moshing and then go pick up a bar. It depends on what what the task at hand is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, something else that I thought was, interesting about that is almost the discussion about like getting out of your head and into your body. It sort of sounds like that may be a thread that sort of ties all those pieces together. Have you always been able to do that, like throughout your athletic career, or is that something that you've learned recently?
I don't know if I don't know if I was really aware of it early in my athletic career, but it's been more like recently that I've learned that I do it. And so I may have been doing it, but I just wasn't aware of it. And I think that it wasn't until like last year's Open that I was like, somebody was like, oh, okay, like what were you thinking during the workout? And I was like, I don't remember the workout. Like I don't remember, like I can't tell you much about the workout because I don't remember it. And like, good, because means I was in the zone. Like I was in a zone of just moving and not thinking. And good. I don't remember the workout, So that's what I'm striving for ultimately, is to not remember the workout, just move my body. To, the workouts that you get done and you're like, whoa, did that like really just happen? I'm done already? And those are the workouts where I'm like, okay, good. I was in the zone. Like, that's what I want. I don't want to be in the workout and being like, oh my gosh, I have 2 rounds left. Oh my gosh, like, how am I going to get through this? My body hurts, my knee hurts, my shoulders hurt, I'm tired, I'm breathing heavy, and wait, what do I get to eat for lunch? And stuff like that. I just want to be able to like not think and just move.
Sure. So it sounds like it's something that you potentially were doing previously, sometimes, and then you sort of recognize, okay, this is actually the state in which I perform optimally. How do I figure out how to get here on purpose, rather than just kind of like, oh, if the stars align and Mercury is in retrograde and, the market is here and the tectonic plates are there, and now I'm here. So that's interesting. It's almost like a reverse engineering something that you've done naturally to be able to do it on command.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we talked briefly about this recovery program that you have, but we haven't actually talked about your own personal story relative to recovery, right? This is something you talked about on previous podcasts. And I actually think the one that you did with Mind Muscle Project gets into that in pretty good detail. So I'll post a link to that so people can really dig deep into that story. But I do want to hear what have you seen as, your own process going through recovery and now trying to implement mental training for a sport. Do you see any parallels there, or are these separate entities altogether?
Yeah, they're completely parallel. It's so funny because it's just like CrossFit and, like the mental strength and the mental side of CrossFit is so much related to recovery and like the 12 steps that it's like every day I'm like, seriously, is this real? It's, a lot of times I'll joke that like, in my addiction, I suffered, and I put myself in that place a lot. I was, I forced myself to suffer, and that was what I was okay with doing. I was always okay with suffering. And in CrossFit, like, we're good at suffering, like we know how to suffer. And so you see a lot of times like people who are in recovery, they're those people that can really, really dig deep and just hurt really bad in the middle of a workout because they're used to it. Like, they've done it before, and now they're doing it it's weird to say, but in a good way, like, it's weird to say that we're like suffering through a workout, and that's like a good thing, but it is. It's a much better suffering than, suffering through our addiction.
Sure. So I think that's super interesting because on the surface, it almost seems like someone who is very dedicated to something like CrossFit and fitness and competitive sport and all that kind of stuff, that's a totally different mindset than like, okay, I'm going to abuse drugs and alcohol or, have an eating disorder. But there is some sort of, like you mentioned, a parallel in terms of like, I have this ability to put myself somewhere super uncomfortable and sort of like override the signals from my body in order to do something other than like what it sort of wants me to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that there is like that, we talk a lot about get comfortable being uncomfortable. And in my addiction, I used drugs and alcohol, and I had an eating disorder because I was super uncomfortable. And the only way for me to get comfortable was to be out of my body, like have an altered state. And so, CrossFit taught me how to be comfortable with the uncomfortableness. And so, even the littlest things like, this is really not a little thing. This is like a big thing, that I talk about a lot is, I had a hard time being in social settings, like without drugs and alcohol. And, I was always the party girl, and whenever we went out, I had to have drugs and alcohol because I didn't know how to interact, and I didn't feel comfortable interacting with people without it. And so when I first got sober, I struggled with that because it was hard for me to go out, because I didn't have my crutch. I didn't have like social lubrication. And so, but through CrossFit, it's helped me realize, like CrossFit's helped me realize that it's okay. And I'm able to go into social settings and accept that, okay, I'm going to feel a little awkward, and that's okay. And if I choose to just stand by the food table, that's okay. And when I want to leave, if I am feeling like awkward, I can just leave. I don't have to say 1,000 good, like I always, I call it the ninja peace out. Or like I just ghost out of the party, because nobody's going to remember that I went and said hi or bye to everyone. Yes, it might be the most like the more socially acceptable behavior. But for me, for somebody who has a hard time in social settings, like I just want to leave. I don't want to say like, goodbye, I miss you, I'll see you later. I just want to leave. And so I've learned to be okay with like, this is who I am and this is how I'm going to do it. And that's okay. And I don't need to have, drugs and alcohol to make me be able to handle that situation. But, I'm a really firm believer that like CrossFit got me there. Just being able to, learning that being uncomfortable is okay. And, like I don't have to I don't know. I mean, I don't have to mold to someone else's standards.
Sure. Yeah. That, you may be getting like signals or emotions that are like, oh my God, everyone's looking at you. This person's mad that you didn't say this, like that all this input is happening, but you just don't have to react to it. You just be like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. It's same thing when you're on rep 27 of some set of 50 of something terrible. And, it's like your grip is going and your lungs hurt. And it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, like this doesn't feel good, but I'm okay. I can keep going.
Right. Yesterday I was doing a workout with, I was doing Angie and it ends with 100 air squats. And every time my legs started, like my quads started burning, that was like exactly the thought that was like going in my head was like, you're just fine. Like you're going to be okay. You're going to be able to stand up. I don't know. That was just like the thought that kept going through my head. Like there's not like, it's okay. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to like, for your quads to be burning. You don't need to stop, like, I don't know. It was cool. It was like a cool mental, like feeling of just like, you can keep going just because they hurt. They're not going to stop hurting until you're done. So you might as well just finish.
Yeah, sure. It's like, yeah, it makes sense that there's some sort of signal from our muscles to our brain that something is going wrong, but that doesn't mean that signal is always right? That we actually have that capacity to just say, yeah, I know. Like, I know you hurt. It's all right. We'll keep going.
Yeah, it was like, okay, this is a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm not dying. Like I'm always going to be able to stand up. So.
Yeah. And worst case scenario is you can't stand up and
right.
and that's not so bad either.
Right. And like, that's the thing is that like, and then that's praised. That's praised like for me, like if that happened to me and I told my coach that like, oh my gosh, I squatted so many times and so fast and went so far to failure that I literally fell on the ground and couldn't stand up, he'd be like, good, finally, like we found something that broke you and now we can like build on that. And so, yeah, I mean, I would have celebrated that more than finishing the workout, because then it's like, all right, now I pushed myself to my full capacity, and I know I did. There's no question about it.
Yeah, if you fail an air squat, you probably did find the limit.
Yeah.
I specifically remember some workout I was doing with this wall balls, and whoever was coaching was like, you can always do another wall ball. And then I just like hit myself in the face on like the next 2 or 3 reps, just like didn't get my arms up quick enough. Just like, well, okay, I guess that's, we did actually find the limit on wall balls there.
Right.
So when you have these folks coming in who are in recovery, and they're, going through this CrossFit program, I mean, what does that look like? Are you just having them do CrossFit classes, or are you also coaching them on some of this mindset stuff we've been talking about?
So I have another coach that works, with these athletes also, and she actually does, a majority of the coaching, just because I don't have the time to be giving as much time as we need to give them, basically. Sure. So she does a lot, and she's really, really good at working with them on the mental side of it. We work very closely together, and so there's a lot of times when we're communicating about this kind of stuff. And she has 14 years of sobriety. And so, in terms of, knowing sobriety, she is my role model of somebody, of a strong woman in sobriety. And so one big thing that she does with them every day is, after stretching, the last stretch is like arm over your shoulder to stretch, across your body. And the last thing is pat yourself on the back and tell yourself, I'm amazing. And, it's such a small thing, but it's such a good feeling, to be able to do that. And we will have some clients who like refuse to say it, but eventually they do. And what we learned is that it was, at first it's like, oh, it's kind of cheesy, it's kind of corny. But they were talking about it, and they were telling each other, other people who hadn't been in to CrossFit about it, and so it was spreading. So now it's an everyday thing. It's we don't end a class without telling ourselves we're amazing.
Got it. And then were they refusing just because they thought it was corny?
No, it's I think it was more of like they really like had a hard time telling themselves they were amazing.
Yeah, they just like didn't believe it so much that they're like, no, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's interesting. And so then just over time, just repeatedly being like, no, like you guys are going to say this.
Yeah. Now we got them. Most of them say it now. Majority.
Still got a few holdouts.
Every once in a while we'll get a new person who's like, but after like 1 or 2 times they're in, because we like celebrate it. Like everyone like yells it. It's really cool.
Sure. Yeah. And then they feel almost more awkward not saying it when it's like,
totally.
Like everyone else is doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where it's like, the class in school, if everyone is, being disobedient and throwing spitballs or paper airplanes, like, it's the nerd who's doing their homework. But if everyone's saying they're doing their homework and you have one person throwing paper airplanes, everyone else is like, dude, cut it out. Like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys have these folks coming in. coaching them in CrossFit. I guess what results have you seen from this program? What are people getting out of it?
The results have been amazing. I cannot express how, like, every time I even, like, just thinking about it, like, gives me chills. We actually had them do, like, a homework assignment of writing letters. And it was actually just, it was a nutrition homework, assignment. But they took it, as just more of like a fitness related. And so they wrote these letters saying, just talking about how health and fitness has affected, their recovery and, their life. And the letters, like, not one of them, I guess I wouldn't say like not one of them, but every single one of them talks about how much CrossFit has changed their life and how much, just moving has helped their self-esteem. It's helped them, like, feel like, work through depression, work through anxiety, work through that, like, social anxiety. I think I got like, I like to have the letter sitting right here in front of me, but it's like, probably 12 to 15 letters, and all of them just talk about, like, just such good, feel good stories. I've actually typed them all up, and I'm going to submit them to CrossFit headquarters. Because just reading them, like, it's just, you can't, like, not smile. You can't not, feel amazing. And we see it, right? Like, we see it as coaches, but to be able to hear it from them firsthand was so much better than even seeing it. So
Sure.
It was really cool.
Did you put getting the letters in your gratitude journal?
No. because I got them, we got them like a while ago. So they, like, my gratitude journal started like December 26th, and we got them before then, or they would have gone. If I get new ones, they would go in there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that could be a fail-safe. You could just read one of those and then be like, oh, I read one of those letters. That was pretty good. And then just write it in there.
Absolutely. Like, I posted on Facebook one of the letters that we got because the girl that wrote it is, like, a phenomenal writer. And, like, her writing, like, came out in this letter, and it was she's such a good writer that you could just feel exactly, like, how she felt. And every time I read it, like, it gets better and better. And so, like, I keep reading that letter over and over, and it just, every time I read it, it gets better.
Sure. And how much do these letters resonate with your own experiences? Are these the same types of experiences you had coming into CrossFit, or is this something different?
It's like, yes, it's exactly how I felt when I came into CrossFit. When I came into CrossFit, I needed a place where I was going to be accepted and where I could kind of, like, channel my energy and be somewhere and have something to look forward to. And that's a lot of, like, what they talk about is, like, that they're able to look forward to CrossFit every day, and that it's a new outlet for them, that it's a community, it's camaraderie, that they get to experience it with their peers, that kind of stuff. And that was a lot of where I was at when I got sober. But the difference is that these people are in treatment. Some of them are in treatment. And so part of their treatment is CrossFit. And so a lot of them, their story is that, like, they that this is a big part of their treatment, of their treatment program.
Sure. So you kind of mentioned this previously, but I mean, one of the things that you discussed was that when you stop actually drinking, then you sort of lose your friend circle, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, I was the party person and now I'm not, and now I have a different identity. So I imagine that that's super challenging for people to have a new, I guess, social network, a new group of friends, and a different identity. So, I mean, how does that relate to them coming into the CrossFit gym?
Yeah, you know what's really cool is that like CrossFit, yeah, there's not everyone here, not all of our, basic members are in recovery. But everyone here like accepts that some people are, and you're not like shunned away for being in recovery. The cool thing about CrossFit is that it's so much like going to like a 12-step meeting, and that you're going to go into a CrossFit gym and you might have the CEO of some freaking huge business and you would never know, and you're working out right next to them and you don't know that. And it's the same thing at like a 12-step meeting. You might, be sitting next to somebody who, is, like I said, the CEO of a huge corporation, and you never know it. It puts people on a basic playing level. It also, I think, is giving an opportunity for these people to connect with other people. So we have 2 girls specifically that are in outpatient, and they come in every single day together. And this is like their thing that they do together, and they have each other and they're accountable to each other. And they've developed their friendship even more because they come into CrossFit and they suffer together. And it's like these friendships that we have, that we create through CrossFit, are so much, I wouldn't say like so much different, but there is just a different bond that you have with somebody who you suffer alongside of, as opposed to somebody who you don't suffer alongside of. I have friends that they don't CrossFit, and the reality of it is that I don't see them quite as much as I see my CrossFit friends, because I get to see them every single day, no matter what. My other friends, I have to make like a huge effort to really like go and spend time with them. And I don't get to see them as much as I see my CrossFit friends. So I did notice that, like for me, when I got sober, that changed a little bit. Like my friends I started developing were friends that I saw every day, friends that were excited to see me at the gym and didn't care whether I, where I had been in my past. They didn't care what I had done previously. They just cared that I showed up every day and that I was doing the next best thing, right now.
Sure. So it sort of strips away just a lot of the normal social expectations and things that get people caught up. It's just like you have this built-in thing, like, I'm going to be here every day. So are you. We better get along.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really interesting. So is this something that you guys have developed on your own at CrossFit St. Helens?
Yes. Well, we got a grant through our mental health department.
Got it.
Yeah.
And is that like a government agency then that actually facilitates this?
They don't really. They facilitated like the grant.
Sure.
Other than that, they don't really do much. They just gave us like the money to buy equipment, to pay for our coach to be here and coach. And then basically CrossFit St. Helens is donating the space and like, the bills that we have for electric and water and that kind of stuff. And then we are also tracking, we have some things that we have to track. We track like their blood pressure and their weight and their mood and stuff like that.
Sure. So, well, let me ask you this about that program then. Did someone in the government, are they a CrossFitter and then they're like, hey, this is something we need to do? Or did you guys approach them? How did this actually come to be?
We approached them. So I have 2 members who work for the mental health, our local mental health, and I started becoming involved with Phoenix Multisport, and which is a recovery program that offers free CrossFit to people in recovery, and so I started working with Phoenix, and 2 of my members came up to me and were like, hey, we have this opportunity, like there's these grants available. We should, like, what do you think about maybe trying to get a grant to offer, to help people and stuff? And I'm like, funny you should mention that because I actually just started working with this other organization, and I think it's a great idea. Let's do it. And so that was kind of how it came about. And so we, one of our members got the grant written and kind of took care of that stuff. Like, I'm not really involved in like grant writing or like the kind of all that behind the scenes things. It was kind of like, okay, this is what I can offer. I can offer the gym. Like, I'm going to open that up for, you guys and stuff. You guys do the back end kind of stuff. So.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's just, anytime something like that actually works out, it's so incredible. But I know just as a gym owner myself, we see a lot of opportunities that just fall apart due to red tape, right? Anytime you're dealing with like a corporation or a government or something, it's like, okay, this seems like a good idea, but no one from this department is responding to any emails, and it just kind of fizzles. So, sounds like you had some people on the inside who were able to pull that together.
Yeah. It took a while. It probably took us a good 6 to 8 months. And there was a lot of like, oh, not yet, like a lot of that kind of stuff that kind of went along with it. But now we're getting recognized at the state level. And so we're going to go and read some of the letters and take some of the clients and do testimonies to like this national like opiate like seminar. I don't know what it's called, but like it at the state level, we're being recognized for what we're doing. So it's pretty cool.
Awesome. Yeah. So you sort of got right place at the right time and took advantage of this opportunity and are really building something that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's a type of program that could function almost anywhere as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Especially, I mean, if you mention, opiates, that's obviously a problem that has gotten quite a bit worse over the last several years. So there's huge opportunities to try to do something about that.
Yeah.
Awesome. What is the deal with your neck? How are you feeling? Are you okay these days?
Yeah, things are much better. I'm pretty much symptom free. I had a bulge disc C6, C7 was what was the official diagnosis. And honestly, I did a lot of CrossFit for recovery. I just stayed away from, putting pressure on my neck and did what I was suggested to do, which was take it really slow. And so once I was able to incorporate CrossFit back, the CrossFitter in me wanted to just do everything and anything. But I followed like a instruction of taking it, like 1 week at a time and adding on percentage of weight and percentage of volume. I'm really happy with the progress that I've had. And I'm at a place now where I feel like I'm 100% being able to, progress I still have things that I don't think my strength is not quite back. And then like my conditioning in terms of like gymnastics is not quite there, but I feel like I'm 100% to work on that stuff. So yeah, like symptom free and I'm able to do all movements now. So super happy with that and happy with the how the recovery process went.
So since we're sort of falling apart and Skype is really disappointing you on your first Skype call ever, let us know what's the deal. Where do people find out what's going on at CrossFit St. Helens? Where do they follow you on Instagram? Where do they like your posts? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm Team Carleen on Instagram, and then CrossFit St. Helens could use some likes and some followers, and so we're CrossFit St. Helens on Instagram.
Call to action.
And Carleen Matthews on Facebook and Team Carleen on Twitter.
Sure. Is there anywhere that has specific information about that CrossFit for Recovery program as well?
No, we do not have a website yet. We need to get one.
Yeah, I mean that sounds totally incredible, and I think that there would be a lot of people who would be very interested in learning more about what that process actually looks like.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm more than open to sharing everything that I can on it. If people send a direct message to CrossFit St. Helens or me on Instagram, I answer every single message that I'm sent.
Cool, yeah. Send it to CrossFit St. Helens. Follow CrossFit St. Helens and message CrossFit St. Helens. And get those followers up there. We need the social proof needs to go through the roof on that. Hey, this is Todd again, and as most of you know, I consume, read, listen to, watch an absurd amount of content on a regular basis. And a few times per month, I send out my thoughts on some of the most interesting or insightful stuff that I've taken a look at. You can be on the list to receive this fascinating, captivating, and delightful information at toddneef.com. That's I before E. Head over there, go ahead and type your email address in, and then as I send these things out, again, a few times a month, you'll get it and you'll be inundated with a carefully curated list of the best stuff that I am experiencing.